Good morning. I have a short presentation for you today on the very, very recent attack on Iran. This has occurred essentially right after the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And I also want to show you that there is at least a 100-year history of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions having big effects on Iran, just like they tend to do on Russia. So let me share my screen and we will get started. Okay, this will take me just a minute. I have to get rid of some things so that I can see what's going on here. So let's see. Gotta hide that panel and another panel. Okay, and I'm ready to go. Iran attacked. A 100-year history of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions and Iran. So here's what has happened in the past. Saturn was conjunct Neptune on July 31st, 1917. This conjunction was preceded by a lunar eclipse on July 4th and a solar eclipse on July 18th. We often seem to be getting eclipses close to these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, which in itself is interesting and probably intensifies things. Anyway, 1917 was the year the Persian famine began, and that famine killed about 2 million people. All right, fast forward to 1952-53, we had a series of conjunctions, and in 1953 there was a coup d'etat from August 15th through the 19th that was backed by the US and the UK, and it restored power to Mohammad Reza Pahlavi as the Shah of Iran. So that was the beginning of another big change for Iranian society. And this followed the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on July 21st, 1953, and there was a solar eclipse prior to this conjunction around July 10th, and another one on August 9th. Okay, then we had the rise of modern Iran and the Ayatollah Khomeini that occurred on February 11th, 1979. This was the day that the Iranian army basically surrendered to the Ayatollah. And that was the beginning of modern Iran. There was not a Saturn-Neptune conjunction that year, but nonetheless, this change of power coincided with critical transits to the July 21st, 1953 chart for the previous Saturn-Neptune conjunction. We had another series of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions in 1989, and that was another year of change for Iran because that was the year that the Ayatollah Khomeini died. He died on June 3rd, 1989. This was preceded by a Saturn-Neptune conjunction on March 3rd, 1989, and there was a lunar eclipse on February 20th and a solar eclipse on March 7th of that year. So you can look at this history and see that just as Russia has this 100-year history, at least, of being affected by Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, so does Iran. I want to take a quick look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of July 21st, 1953. And in this chart, which I've set up located in Tehran, you can see that Mars and Uranus are making a square to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So that suggests some violence and revolution around this time. All right, now let's look at modern Iran and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 1953. and see how those transits on February 11th, 1979, which is now, I consider, and others consider, the birth date for modern Iran. We'll see how they interact. Well, I have the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 1953 on the inside, and those transits on February 11th, 1979, set for 10:20 a.m. That's when the old Iranian army surrendered to the Ayatollah and his forces. So we look at how these transits interact with that Saturn-Neptune 1953 conjunction. It shows us how things are unfolding, and things look very transformative, violent, and revolutionary, with a fair amount of wounding involved. Transiting Pluto is conjunct Saturn and Neptune, and it's very, very strongly square natal Uranus. Transiting Chiron and the ascendant for this 1979 chart are both square natal Mercury and the lunar nodal axis. So this brings in some wounding, which gets intensified. This is further magnified by transiting Jupiter being conjunct the lunar nodal axis. And as a trigger, we have that transiting Sun is in opposition to natal Pluto. And that should be a small letter N. Sorry about that. There is always a typo somewhere. I'll correct that later. Okay, here is the chart for modern Iran, set for 10:20 a.m. Tehran time on February 11th, 1979. And the thing I want to point out is that in this chart, you have Chiron conjunct the ascendant. We're going to see this appear again. And of course, modern Iran has been wounded and has wounded a lot of others. Many countries see it as the main exporter of terrorism in the Middle East. Now let's take a look at the transits, the general transits that were happening around the time of this attack on Iran. If you listen to my last analysis of the lunar month from February 17th through March 18th, I pointed out that there was a heightened risk for violence or accidents around February 27th, because on this day we not only have Mars making a square to Uranus, but we also have Chiron making a semi-square to the north node, which means it's making a sesquiquadrate to the south node. So there is this heightened potential for violence, aggression, and for wounding of some sort. Of course, this is hot on the heels of the February 20th Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So this is a more intense time already when things could change very rapidly. And of course, as we'll see the very next day, the United States and Israel started bombing Iran. Before I show you the transit chart for that, though, I want to point out something else I've talked about before, and that is that in the chart for America, progress Sun is making a strong square to natal Mars this year. And there are two charts that I use for America. The one I use most often is this July 2nd, 1776 chart that has Libra rising. And the reason I use this chart is because that is the day on which the Declaration of Independence was actually passed by the Continental Congress. More people tend to use the July 4th Sibley chart, and I consider that chart also valid. July 4th is the day that the Declaration of Independence was printed, distributed, and announced to the public. So I see one chart as representing more our outward persona and behavior, and the first chart as representing our inner self. And both charts have progressed suns strongly square natal Mars this year. The July 2nd chart will have that square exact on November 12th, just following the midterm elections in America. And so I would not be surprised if there was some violence or disruption surrounding that election or those elections. But this is very interesting. The Sibley chart, in the Sibley chart, progressed Sun will be exactly square natal Mars on March 4th. That is very, very close to where we are now. And I have pointed out in some of my past videos that there is an increased likelihood of America becoming involved in war or aggression, either at home or abroad during this year. And so far this year, we have invaded Venezuela, and now we have, along with Israel, attacked Iran. Okay. According to news sources, it looks like this attack began around 9:45 a.m. Tehran time in Iran on February 28th, 2026. And what I want to point out here is that Chiron was conjunct the ascendant in this chart set up for Tehran. And that's very interesting because, let's see, we saw, let me go back here, Chiron conjunct the ascendant in the chart for modern Iran. So that resonates with wounding for Iran. And the other thing, of course, is we have Mars and Uranus in a strong square relationship with one another. And at the time of this attack, the moon was making a square to Chiron. So that can add some additional fuel to the fire, more wounding. And if we look at this biwheel, where I have the chart for modern Iran on the inside and the transit chart for the time of this attack on the outside, we can see that Pluto is pretty strongly square natal Chiron and the ascendant. Okay. Well, it looks like that is going to be it. So I'll stop sharing. I'm looking a little fuzzy. Let me see if I can get this camera to focus again. Oh, it doesn't want to focus on me. There. Well, I guess that was happening because I was feeling a little fuzzy this morning. Anyway, this is a short presentation, but gives you some background on the relationship between Saturn-Neptune conjunctions and major changes in Iran. And it gives you some information on why the attack occurred at the time it did, both with respect to global transits, with respect to progressions in the USA chart, and with respect to transits at that time to the chart of modern Iran. And we see things like Mars, Uranus, Chiron, Pluto, other planets being involved in this thing. So we live in interesting times. But with that said, I hope that everyone has good times ahead. I hope the wounding doesn't last long, though I think it may go on for a while, possibly even through mid-May, but we shall see. So I hope you join me again for future videos, and for now, I'll just say so long and be well.